At least 8 people killed in fresh attack by bandits in Zango-Katav local government area of Kaduna State. National Emergency Management Agency (NEMA) confirms rescue of 7 persons from collapsed building in Banana Island area of Lagos State. Osun State Governor Ademola Adeleke approves appointment of principal officers for University of Ilesha. On the foreign scene, Norway expels 15 Russian officials accused of spying under diplomatic cover. Good evening. This is News at 7 on Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Olanipeku. At least 8 people have been killed in a fresh attack by bandits on Akatanginje community in Zango-Katav local government area of Kaduna State. The latest attack is coming some weeks after a similar incident claimed 10 lives at Langsing community in the same local government area. Police authorities are yet to comment on the incident, but the president of Atiap Community Development Association, Sam Timbuwak, said the gunmen invaded the community from a nearby bush at about 9 p.m. yesterday and started shooting at people's houses. He said the bandits attacked 5 houses, during which they shot 8 people dead, while 4 others sustained varying degrees of injuries. The Atiap community, the Atiap president, who disclosed that the scene of the attack is located very close to a military checkpoint, lamented the late arrival of soldiers to the community after the attackers had committed their heinous crimes and left. It asked security agencies to be alive to the responsibilities and fish out those behind the series of attacks. Meanwhile, troops of Operation Forest Sanity have intercepted more than 2,000 rounds of various grades of ammunition being conveyed to bandits by courier around Polewaya in Birnin-Gwari local government area of Kaduna State. The State Commissioner for Internal Security and Home Affairs, Samuel Aruwan, said the ammunition was concealed in different parts of Toyota car. He added that the driver of the vehicle was arrested by the troops. Here in Osun State, operatives of Osun Amotekun Corps have embarked on a search for a kidnapped victim in Agoigbira, a Fulani settlement in Ilorin. The victim, identified as Mohammed Jibril, was kidnapped yesterday by unknown gunmen. In a statement today, Amotekun Corps Commander Brigadier General Bashir Adewumbi, retired, asserted that the men of the Corps were joined by hunters and Kiriji security to comb the forest in search of the victim. They assured residents of Osun State that there will be no hiding place for any criminal in the state. And turning to Lagos State, the National Emergency Management Agency (NEMA) says 7 persons have been rescued from the collapsed building in Banana Island, Ikoyi area of the state. The 7-story structure under construction collapsed yesterday, but no lives were lost. While giving an update about the incident today, the Lagos Territorial Coordinator of NEMA, Ibrahim Farinloye, said apart from the rescued victims, 1 person was rushed to a hospital where he is being treated. On his part, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency, LASEMA, Olufemi Oke Osonyitolu, told journalists that the emergency response was swift. In the wake of the building collapse, the Lagos State government said it had begun an investigation into the matter. Meanwhile, there was confusion today as the management of Banana Island Estate refused to grant journalists access to the site of the collapsed 7-story building. The development is the latest in a series of building collapses in Lagos and other parts of the country.
When the incident occurred, we moved in swiftly, promptly, effectively, and efficiently with all the primary stakeholders. Our response time was 10 minutes. We moved in with our sophisticated equipment. We used DELSA. The life site was divided into 4 quadrants. Now, and we checked each of the quadrants with our DELSA, and we did not locate anybody under the debris with our our DELSA. However, because we are professionals and meticulous about what we are doing, we are using a hammer and excavator with cranes together. We started moving from one layer to another. And during this emergency response, we are able to rescue several people alive. Those people that were rescued were treated on the spot and discharged. It's only one that was taken to a private hospital where he's receiving adequate treatment.
The rate at which Nigerians, most especially youths, have been migrating out of the country in search of greener pastures has been tagged as worrisome, especially the level witnessed in 2022. In this report, Olayinka Ali speaks to some youths on why they leave Nigeria.
Japa, a Yoruba word for to run, flee, or escape, has become a buzzword for the aspiration that young Nigerians have to leave the country and migrate elsewhere to seek greener pastures, even made popular by an Afrobeat song with the same title. Many youth believe that it is a response to the leadership failure across decades and government, both the civilian and military. Nigeria has a population of over 200 million people, most of whom are youth. According to the Census Bureau of the United States, Nigeria's population will surpass that of the United States in 2047. It is pleasing that Nigeria as a nation is regarded as a giant of Africa and as the most populous country in Africa. But the question is, why is Nigeria faced with mass immigration? Femi Oludare is a Nigerian who disclosed that in few days he is going to be out of the country seeking a greener pasture, although he plans to come back and invest in the agricultural sector in the nearest future.
There are a lot of reasons why people are traveling. People travel on purpose for education. People travel out of frustration, and because looking at the system we have the system we have is not really encouraging the youth. So people find reasons to leave the country. But for some of us, we are going on purpose to be a better person so that we can come back and come and invest on this, because there are still several opportunities. There are still several resources here.
For Olamide Akinlabi, she and many others were disappointed at the outcome of the last presidential election, and it got her so depressed that all that is running through her mind right now is for her to go to another country and start a new life.
I believe we practice democracy, the act of vote and be voted for. So I believe a lot of youth actually came out on that election day to go and vote for the right candidates they believed should be in the position. But at the long run, the vote didn't count to me. Yes, it didn't count. And that has bring a lot of depression to the youth generally. So, when your votes don't count in your country, then what other things could count?
Although Kudus Balogun in his submission thinks Nigeria has a system good enough, but with not too many opportunities, which he feels is not okay for the national development. He also seeks for greener pastures and come back to invest in his country, Nigeria.
It's only good when you have the intention of going there to gain skills and exposure to be able to come back and impact in our national development. But other than that, most people now go with the intention of going there to stay, live, and forget about Nigeria totally, and I feel that's bad. So my own idea behind it is, it's not like the Nigerian system is not good enough or is not up to standard, but the opportunities available cannot go round, and I feel that's like an impediment to our national development. So if an avenue is there for me to go, learn, develop, then come back, I'll be willing to.
A Nigerian, Tumishe Ayodele, who is based in the United Kingdom, suggested that Nigerians in diaspora or aspiring diasporans should look for a way to invest in their own country. That way, the issue of brain drain would be resolved.
Everybody is moving, they are leaving, the environment, they are going out of the country. Now, what we're trying to do in essence is, when you look at even the GDP of Nigeria, what we repatriate in terms of money from abroad, to Nigeria is way more than any other aspect of the sector. So we've started working together as community over there now on see how we can look at 2 to 3% more from our income. Now, when we repatriate them, those money that are repatriated are for economics, like for people to say, oh, I want to buy shoes, I want to pay my house rent. So we're looking at proper investment now, So that's the only way I think in the short term, the Nigerian youth can actually turn things around. But in terms of people living, and the caliber of persons there, I would say yes, it looks like a real brain drain, but we can only just do better to see how we could turn that drain into gain. But of course, the situation is not helping for now.
Today, millions of ethnic Nigerians live abroad. The largest communities can be found in the United Kingdom. Olayinka Ali, Western Spring Television News.
Moving on, Benue State Governor Samuel Ortom today called on the federal government to suspend the national census slated for May. Speaking during a meeting with the delegation from the Middle Belt Forum led by its president, Bitrus Pogu, at the government house in Makurdi, Governor Ortom cited the plight of the internally displaced persons in the state who are unlikely to be counted due to their current living situation. According to the governor, before the census is conducted, the federal government needs to ensure adequate security for IDPs in Benue and other parts of the country to enable them to return to their homes and be counted. He also decried the current level of injustice, bias, and tribalism in the country, stating that both leaders and citizens must work together to address these issues. On his part, Mr. Pogu supported Governor Ortom's call for the suspension of the census, citing his belief that the exercise is coming with a hidden agenda. The Police Service Commission has set up an investigation panel on the alleged $10,000 promotion bribery scandal. A statement today by the head of press and public relations, Ikechukwu Ani, said it follows a publication by Sahara Reporters. According to the story, a group parading as aggrieved officers of the Nigeria Police Force alleged that the commission gave special promotions to junior officers above senior ones after allegedly collecting a bribe of a sum of $10,000. The PSC stated that it does not sell promotions in the Nigeria Police Force and will not start now when a deliberate effort is being made to reposition and reinvigorate the force, especially with the assumption of duty of Solomon Arase as chairman of the commission. In the meantime, the Nigeria Police Force has dismissed 3 officers for after they were seen in a viral video in Katsina State firing their weapons in celebration of a famous artist. In a statement today, a first public relations officer, Olumuyiwa Adejobi, said the officers were dismissed for misconduct. According to the statement, the officers were tried and found guilty of misuse of firearms, abuse of power, gross indiscipline, and wastage of live ammunition. It listed the officers involved as Inspector Dahiru Shuaibo, Sergeant Abdullahi Badabasi, and Sergeant Isa Danladi. The statement added that the punishment is to serve as a deterrent to others, as the police would not tolerate any form of misconduct or unprofessionalism from any officer, irrespective of his or her rank. And in other news, the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, says Bayelsa, Delta, Lagos, and River States are more prone to flooding this year. The agency explained that the flooding, which will be due to the rise in sea level and tidal surge, will negatively impact agriculture, human settlements, and transportation in the state. The agency, while calling for early warning action to mitigate the impact of the predicted flood, said this year's flood may be more than what was witnessed last year. According to NEMA, last year's floods resulted in 665 deaths and injured 3,181 persons nationwide. You're watching news at 7 on Western Spring Television. Still to come, Norway expels 15 Russian officials accused of spying under diplomatic cover. We'll bring you more on these when we return.
Ahmadu Bello brings Royal was born 6th of December 1910 at Raba Village, Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His father was a district head and heir apparent to the Sultanate throne from the house of Usmanu Danfodio, a religious and social reformer who brought the Habib dynasty under the Fulani Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. Ahmadu Bello raised the bar of political consciousness and participation when, in 1944, he engineered the establishment of the Northern People's Congress (NPC) as the first political party in northern Nigeria and the rallying point for politicians in the region before independence. History will not forget Ahmadu Bello for his charisma and political sagacity, which provided easy passage for his kinsmen to assume political and administrative positions in Nigeria's post-independence era. The distinguished elder statesman and Sardauna of Sokoto has his face on his country's 200 naira currency as a mark of honor to one of the architects of Nigeria's independence. Western Spring Television identifies Ahmadu Bello as a watershed character in history. The British Empire was the largest and the most powerful in the world. At its zenith, the empire embraced a quarter of the earth's land surface and imposed her imperial majesty's rule on more than 458 million peoples across nations and continents. The empire took off with overseas possessions and trading posts established by England, spread over 3 million kilometers between 16th and early 18th century. Like previous empires, the British Empire began to crumble on its weight of overstretched territories and growing unrest in our various colonies. Today, the British Empire no longer exists. What is in place is the Commonwealth of Nations, a loose association of sovereign states which recognize the King of England as the titular head. Western Spring Television identifies the British Empire as a watershed empire in history. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white suprematists in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Western Spring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history.
You're welcome back. This is still news at 7 on Western Spring Television. A reminder of our headlines. At least 8 people killed in fresh attack by bandits in Zango Katav local government area of Kaduna State. National Emergency Management Agency NEMA confirms rescue of 7 persons from collapsed building in Banana Island area of Lagos State. And Osun State Governor Ademola Adeleke approves appointments of principal officers for University of Ilesha. And on the foreign scene, Norway expels 15 Russian officials accused of spying under diplomatic cover. Osun State Governor Senator Ademola Adeleke has approved the appointment of Professor Taiwo Ashaolu as Vice Chancellor of the University of Ilesha alongside other principal officers. The governor appointed Funsho as registrar, Mukaila Oyekomi as bossa, while Adewale Ogunshikwe was employed as the university librarian. A statement by spokesperson to the governor, Malam Olawale Rashid, revealed that Secretary to the State Government, Teslim Igbalayi, issued letters of appointments to the principal officers today in his office. The SSG charged them to uphold virtue of professionalism and integrity, which endeared them to the governor, Adeleke, and which recommended them for the appointment. The newly appointed Vice-Chancellor, Professor Ashaolu, is a professor of accounting and finance and a former dean, Faculty of Administration, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. He was the chairman of the University of Ilesha Review Committee, which was set up by Governor Adeleke to address all outstanding issues for the eventual takeoff of the institution. In Sokoto State, the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) has assured residents of the state that Saturday's National Assembly supplementary election will be free, fair, and credible. Speaking at a stakeholders meeting today, INEC National Commissioner for the Election, Modibo Alkali, assured that the exercise in Sokoto will be one of the best in the country. He also insisted that all parties, including the regions, must adhere to the rules of the game, stressing that the Commission is poised to support the advancement of democracy and democratic processes. They urged party leaders and stalwarts to educate their supporters and members to be of peaceful conduct during the exercise. And reactions have trailed the Investment and Securities Bill passed by the National Assembly, which aims to strengthen the functioning of the capital market and protect investors. The bill includes provisions for more stringent punishment for operators of Ponzi schemes and illegal investment schemes that have led to the loss of billions of naira and have affected confidence in the investment climate in Nigeria. Joseph Atewe has the rest of the story.
Ponzi schemes, also known as pyramid sale schemes, are a money laundering system where investors are lured in with the promise of high returns on investments after a specified period. Sadly, in recent years, thousands of Nigerians have fallen prey to the devious antics of money doubling platforms, which have thrown many into poverty. Many Nigerians have also placed the blame on the official declaration of economic recession in early 2016, which saw Nigerians experience a proliferation of the world's oldest scam, the Ponzi scheme. After the declaration by the federal government, Nigerians began to seek alternative means of income via schemes that looked viable on surface value but fraught with potential tragic consequences in the long run. Mustafa Bello and Tunji Fraser, who are residents of Osun, sadly explains to Western Spring Television the struggle they went through after losing a lot to Ponzi scheme.
Yes, very well. It was a huge blow, a huge step back for me. That was in 2019. I was working with my uncle at a block industry as a manager. So he was giving me 35,000 naira. So there is a friend of mine that introduced me to one forest trading or something, to one of his friends, Kamal, in Abeokuta. So that Kamal is working with Daniel Weiss. That is Wale Africa or West Africa or something. I think the case is in court. So I was giving him my money that they, every month they are giving me certain percentage. I'm not collecting it. I'm still doing it. So my money there was 520,000 naira. So at the end of the day, the scheme just collapsed. All my money gone.
I fell for it. In fact, I had to pay almost 90-something thousand naira. About, was it 94,000? And it was 2017 to 2018. Early year, in fact, it was after New Year, after I was even going for prayer that day. I've been scammed even during the time of MMM. I ventured into it, hoping that I could get something. Even there's this normal one that they did 2020, this one called Gift Award. This guy called Gift Award. In fact, I did not put enough, I did not put plenty money, but the little I put, the guy ran away with my money, ran away with our money. I will start seeing the kind of life he was living out there.
For Femi Raji, they lost almost 250,000 to the scheme in 2014, hence made him to lose interest in the scheme. But how Nigerians are yet to learn from this painful history still remains a mystery to him, saying he's surprised that Nigerians still fall for it.
I could remember vividly, I think that was years 2015 or 16, if I could remember. I was in Ibadan, I was working with UBA Bank then, yeah, so I think I actually used my money to invest on MMM money. Sometimes I can't even remember vividly again. So I think the last time I could check, okay, I actually checked my wallet or the dashboard there about then. My money has increased from, I think, sometimes to like 250 something thousand. Unfortunately, to cut it short, I couldn't get the money out because the whole website was down. So that was how everything went, and I logged up. Ever since then, I've never. Anytime anybody is talking about all this, use your money to like save your money here in the next few weeks, you get this amount, I will never listen. I do not even care.
According to multiple reports, a bill which is expected to aid the functioning of the capital markets and facilitate the ongoing economic diversification in the country, among others, have since been passed by the House of Representatives in December 2022. The bill will ensure that promoters of Ponzi schemes risk up to 10 years imprisonment following the passage of the Investment and Security Amendment Bill 2023 into law by the Senate. This news has excited many Nigerians who can't wait to see many promoters of the scheme who have allegedly duped them be behind bars for years. Joseph Atewe, Western Spring Television News.
On the foreign scene, Norway has expelled 15 Russian officials that it accused of spying under diplomatic cover. Norway's Foreign Minister Anniken Huitfeldt said the country would not allow Moscow to use its embassy to carry out covert intelligence activities. It is the latest in a string of Russian expulsions since it launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year. A government statement said Norwegian authorities had monitored the individuals over time before they were declared unacceptable or unwelcome. Norway said Russia poses the greatest intelligence threat to the country faces, and that the threat is increasing against the backdrop of Europe's deteriorating security situation. Norway shares a 197-kilometer land border with Russia in the Arctic, and the relations have suffered throughout the Ukraine crisis. In the meantime, leaked United States documents have revealed that the disagreements in Russia's security apparatus led to the Defense Ministry being accused of undercounting casualties of the war in Ukraine. Russia has said that very little publicly about the scale of its war debts, but the files show the FSB Security Service claimed officials were not counting deaths of the Russian National Guard, Wagner mercenaries, and others. It comes as the classified files indicate that Washington believed United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres was soft on Russia over Ukraine.
A series of leaked reports purporting to be classified U.S. intelligence documents linked to the war in Ukraine has drawn skepticism and denials from U.S. spy agencies and several United States allies. These documents have been the subject of a media and political furore in recent days, putting the Pentagon on high alert as it tried to access and contain the leaks.
We're taking this very, very seriously. The president has been briefed on this. He will stay briefed on this. The Department of Defense is looking into this. They are leading an interagency effort here to review whatever national security implications might come out of all this. And the Department of Justice is leading a criminal investigation. So we're taking this very, very seriously. There is no excuse.
Photos of the classified files began circulating wildly in Russian social media channels last week. The files suggest Washington has been closely monitoring Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, as several documents describe private communications involving Mr. Guterres and his deputy. The documents contain candid observations from Mr. Guterres about the war in Ukraine and a number of African leaders. Meanwhile, one leaked document focuses on the Black Sea grain deal brokered by the UN and Turkey in July following fears of a global food crisis. It suggests that Mr. Guterres was so keen to preserve the deal that he was willing to accommodate Russia's interests, emphasizing Guterres' efforts to improve Russia's ability to export, even if it involves sanctioned Russian entities or individuals. His actions in February, according to the assessment, were undermining broader efforts to hold Moscow accountable for its actions in Ukraine. UN officials bristled at the suggestion that the war-starved diplomat was being soft on Moscow. Saying he wouldn't comment on leaked documents, one senior official said the UN was driven by the need to mitigate the impact of the war on the world's poorest. Russia has frequently complained that its own exports of grain and fertilizer are being adversely affected by international sanctions and has threatened at least twice to suspend cooperation with the grain deal unless its concerns are addressed. Although Russian grain and fertilizer are not subject to international sanctions, Russia says it has experienced difficulties with securing shipping and insurance. Another document from mid-February describes a frank conversation between Mr. Guterres and his deputy, Amina Mohammed. In it, Mr. Guterres expresses dismay at a call from the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, for Europe to produce more weapons and ammunition as a result of the war in Ukraine. The two also talk about a recent summit of African leaders. Amina Mohammed says that Kenya's President William Ruto is ruthless and that she doesn't trust him. It is well known that America is among a number of nations which routinely spy on the UN, but when the products of that espionage come to light, it's highly embarrassing and for the world's leading diplomat, potentially damaging. The U.S. National Security spokesperson John Kirby has released a statement revealing fresh information of the activity of the U.S. military in Ukraine.
There's a small U.S. military presence at the embassy in conjunction with the defense attaché's office to help us work on accountability of the material that is going in and out of Ukraine. So they're attached to that embassy and to that defense attaché. They are not fighting on the battlefield. We are not providing enabling support on the battlefield.
UN officials are clearly unhappy with America's interpretation of Mr. Guterres' efforts, and they say that Mr. Guterres has made his opposition to Russia's war very clear. Temitope Ajijola Oluwaola, Western Spring Television News.
Qatar and Bahrain have announced that they had agreed to end a long-running diplomatic feud and re-establish relations. Bahrain in 2017 joined Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Egypt in imposing a diplomatic blockade on Qatar. Qatar's foreign ministry said agreement and reconciliation was reached in talks at the Gulf Cooperation Council headquarters in Saudi Arabia. The neighbors decided to restore diplomatic relations between the two countries according to the principles of the United Nations Charter. Bahrain's foreign ministry released a similar statement. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain and Egypt imposed a blockade in 2017, accusing Qatar of supporting extremist organizations in the region and becoming too close to Iran. In Africa, the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, has ruled out political negotiations with the M23 rebel group. As part of an internationally brokered peace deal, the group has been withdrawing from areas it had captured. Mr. Tshisekedi said according to the agreement, the M23 rebels are to demobilize before returning to civilian life. The group, which is widely reported to be backed by Rwanda, had previously said it was expecting negotiations with the Kinshasa government. Over the last 18 months, around 75,000 people have been displaced by the fighting. United States President Joe Biden has addressed a joint sitting of Ireland's parliament, becoming the fourth American leader to do so. The U.S. president revealed that former President Barack Obama's great-great-grandfather left Ireland 5 weeks before Mr. Biden's ancestors left the same port. Mr. Biden is on a tour of the Republic of Ireland, having earlier been in Northern Ireland to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Peace Agreement. Earlier today, he met Irish President Michael D. Higgins at his official residence and also had talks with Prime Minister Leo Varadkar. Thousands of people gathered to welcome him last night as he visited distant relatives in Carlingford in the northeast of the country.
Yesterday, I returned to County Louth, where I toured the Carlingford Castle, likely one of the last glimpses of Ireland my Finnegan ancestors saw as they gazed on their way out in what in those days was referred to as a coffin ship. And they sailed out of Newry in 1850. I wasn't going to say this, but I'll say it anyway. The idea was, I later learned from the Irish Times, they did some little background check, and my good friend Barack Obama, and he is my good friend, his grandfather was a shoemaker like mine, sailed 5 weeks earlier from the same port. The idea they both sailed for a new life and thought their grandchildren, their great-great-grandsons would both be president, I think is really a little bit of Irish malarkey.
And still ahead, almost 2 million vulnerable Nigerians impacted by projects implemented under the federal government's National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy for the year 2022. We'll have more on these and other business stories after this break. Please do stay with us.
Born 16th September 1923, named Harry Lee Kwan and known as Lee Kuan Yew, he was often addressed by his initials of LKY. Lee Kuan Yew was a barrister and the first Prime Minister of Singapore between 1959 and 1990. Educated at Raffles Institution from 1936 to 1940 and the Fitzwilliam House between 1947 and 1949, Lee Kuan Yew established a highly effective and anti-corrupt governance system that midwives the transformation of Singapore into a high net worth income economy within a generation. He never hid his exception to Western mode democratic ideal, which he believed had not assisted developing nations to attain good government. Before his death on 23rd March 2015, the People's Action Party, which he founded, had used its political influence to establish the United World College of Southeast Asia to expand his economic ideas among countries that constitute the Asian Tiger. Western Spring Television identifies Lee Kuan Yew as a major character in history. The history of guns is traced to China. The Chinese had developed a technology civilization that produced devices identified as guns at about 1000 AD. By the end of the 13th century, the devices had become true guns and described as metal barrel firearms that fired single projectiles which occluded the barrel. When did gun become an instrument of war? The first battles to be decided by firearms were between French and Spanish soldiers. The early 16th century warfare included Magnano in 1515, Bicocca in 1522, and Pavia in 1525. The wars were fought in Italy. The gun is a weapon of destruction and death, but humanity sees it as a potent instrument of family destruction. People with guns feel safer even if they don't display it. Western Spring Television identifies history of guns as a watershed event in history. Born Jeremiah Oyeni Obafemi on March 6, 1905, Obafemi Awolowo was a prime architect of Nigeria's independence and most consummate advocate of free education and social welfare in Africa's most populous nation. Erudite politician, thinker, and philosopher, Awo was fondly addressed by associates and political colleagues, brought his unique attributes to bear on governance in the defunct Western region. He administered as leader of government business and the premier between 1955 and 1958. Obafemi Awolowo's premiership witnessed pioneering in multi-sectoral policy initiatives and execution. The Western region under his administration paraded several enviable records. first television station in Africa, first real estate in Nigeria, first high-rise building in Nigeria, first modern sports stadium in Nigeria, first agricultural settlement in Nigeria, first modern civil service secretariat in Nigeria, and first industrial estate in Nigeria. His face is on 100 Naira denomination as a mark of honor for his distinguished services to his country. Western Spring Television identifies Obafemi Awolowo as a major character in history.
Welcome back, and now to business. Almost 2 million vulnerable Nigerians have been impacted by projects implemented under the federal government's National Poverty Reduction with Growth Strategy for the year 2022. In a statement today, Senior Assistant to the President and Media and Publicity, Office of the Vice President, Laolu Akonde, said a steering committee met at the Presidential Villa, Abuja. Mr. Akonde said a progress report presented at the meeting, chaired by Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, also indicated that 1.6 million smallholder farmers were impacted under the Agriculture for Jobs plan. It disclosed that more than 8,000 Nigerians were employed in rural roads constructed under the Rural Roads Program, which built 40 rural roads in 120 communities, covering about 57.3 kilometers across the country. Mr. Akonde said a report presented by Minister of State, Budget and National Planning, Clem Agba, showed that with the release of 50 billion naira, programs that had achieved 100% completion include Agriculture for Food and Jobs Plan and construction of rural roads. Seplat Energy PLC says it has provided all of the required documentation to the Ministry of Interior regarding the immigration status of the company's Chief Executive Officer, Roger Brown. The company's assertion follows a 4-count charge instituted on April 6, 2023 by the federal government against the energy firm, its board chairman, Basil Omiyi, as well as Mr. Brown at the Federal High Court in Abuja over an alleged breach of extant provisions of the Immigration Act 2015. In the suit, the defendants are accused of conspiring amongst themselves to allow Mr. Brown accept employment as Chief Executive Officer at Seplat Energy PLC without the consent of the Comptroller General of Immigrations, contrary to the Immigrations Act 2015. In a statement by Mr. Omiyi today, the company expressed confidence that the judicial process will address the situation appropriately. On March 3, 2023, the federal government had revoked the visa, resident permit, and work permit of Mr. Brown following allegations of racism, favoring foreign workers, and discriminating against Nigerian employees by aggrieved stakeholders of the company. Seplat Energy refuted the accusations, saying its board unanimously passed a vote of confidence in Mr. Brown, who continues to discharge his duties and responsibilities as CEO from the Seplat UK office. A United Nations report today closing the gender gap in the agriculture and food system, where women still earn less than men, would add $1 trillion to the global economy. The report updating the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization 2011 study into the matter found that women continue to occupy a marginal place in agri-food systems. It said women must cope with work conditions that are often more difficult than those of men, as they are confined to jobs that are casual, part-time, informal, or low-skilled. Women represent more than half of the agricultural workforce in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa and just under half in Southeast Asia. Around the world, they are lagging behind when it comes to access to land, resources like fertilizers and seeds, financing, or technology, while they are often more dependent on agriculture to survive. The report said during the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, 22% of women lost their jobs in agri-food industries, compared to just 2% of men. It added that their income is also 18.4% lower than men employed in agriculture. Welcome to sports. Bayern Munich have suspended Sadio Mane after punching teammate Leroy Sané in the face following this week's Champions League loss to Manchester City. Bayern said Mane will be also fined and won't be part of the Bayern squad for their home Bundesliga game against Hoffenheim on Saturday as a result of misconduct. It was reported that Sané's lip was bleeding after the altercation and the two players needed to be separated by their fellow teammates in the dressing room. Sané and Mane were seen on the pitch arguing in the later stages of the match on Tuesday night, where City beat the German champions 3-0 at the Etihad Stadium in the first leg of their Champions League quarter-final first leg. After landing back in Munich, Mane, who was a substitute for the tie, took the team bus from the airport, while Sané was picked up privately. On returning to Munich, Sané was pictured appearing to hide his bottom lip from cameras. Meanwhile, Al Nassr have confirmed that manager Rudi Garcia has left the club just a day after reports emerged of an apparent feud with Cristiano Ronaldo. Al Nassr announced that Garcia left the club by mutual agreement. With 7 fixtures left to play, Al Nassr are in second place, 3 points behind Al Ittihad. And in England, Everton manager Shane Dyche has revealed that he has spoken to Dele Alli, with the midfielder expected to be sidelined for a number of weeks with an unspecified injury. Dele is currently on loan at Besiktas in Turkey, but was granted permission by the club to return home for scans and treatment earlier this month. The former England international has struggled for form and game time since joining the club in August, making only 13 appearances and scoring twice. He last played for the club in February amidst reports of a dispute with manager Senal Ganes. Dele was pictured surrounded by what appeared to be gas canisters earlier this week, sparking fears over his well-being.
Well, he's not here, obviously. He's got an injury, which will keep him out for some time, so that needs to be dealt with. Some of the stuff that's been reported, he's 26. He knows, like most footballers, they know certain things they should be doing, shouldn't be doing. But at the end of the day, as a manager, forgetting about Everton Football Club, as a manager, you can't control everything they do in their lives. There seems to be this myth when they say, what's the manager doing? You go, what? About what? Following them around every minute of every day that they live their lives. You can only guide people with what you think is good for them. And eventually, players have choices. So we recommend they make good choices, of course. But behind that, he's factually injured. He's come back with a proper injury that's going to take some time to get sorted out. So he'll use that period wisely, I hope.
In the meantime, Burnley boss Vincent Kompany has issued a sharp response to questions about his future amidst links with Tottenham Hotspur. The Manchester City legend has steered the Clarets to an immediate return to the English Premier League this season in his first job in English football. Unsurprisingly, Kompany has been linked with a move away from Turf Moor, with reports claiming that the Belgian is a top target for Tottenham to replace Antonio Conte. Kompany was squeezed on his future at a pre-match press conference ahead of Burnley's return to Championship action at the weekend as the bid to win their second-tier title, and the former centre-back was unhappy about questions about links with a move away from his current club.
I don't waste questions on, I don't waste answers on my future. I said it day one of my job here at Burnley, in anticipation that one day there might be a question like this. So crack on. I'm focusing on Reading and the next games. I mean, this is something that is the reason why I chose for Burnley. I said it early. Again, you can trace back to my very first interviews before I even played a game with this team. I chose for people, and I feel in that I made the right decision. And yeah, it's an enviable place to work in. Trust me, especially when we keep talking about managers getting sacked left, right, and centre, and we've got the infrastructure, we've got talents. It's an enjoyable place to work in. So yeah.
To tennis, the Women's Tennis Association will resume tournaments in China this year, having accepted that an investigation into the sexual assault allegations made by former player Peng Shuai will not be carried out by the Chinese government. Former doubles world number 1 Peng said in November 2021 that she was forced into a sexual relationship with a former China vice premier, Zhang Gaoli. The WTA suspended its end-of-the-year events in China and said it would not return until there was an investigation and it had proof of Peng's safety. After making the accusation in a social media post, Peng briefly disappeared from the public eye, and she then later denied making the allegation. Zhang has not publicly commented on the allegation. And that's all at this hour. But just before we go, here is a recap of our major stories. At least 8 people have been killed in a fresh attack by bandits on Atakin J community in Zango Katav local government area of Kaduna State. And in Lagos State, the National Emergency Management Agency NEMA says 7 persons have been rescued from the collapsed building in Banana Island, Ikoyi area of the state. Osun State Governor Senator Ademola Adeleke has approved the appointment of Professor Taiwo Ashaolu as Vice Chancellor of the University of Ilesha alongside other principal officers. And on the foreign scene, Norway has expelled 15 Russian officials that it accused of spying under diplomatic cover. Please do follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Olanikbekun. Good evening.